Let's see. I'm jumping around so much. I'm losing my place. Victims of abuse are weak.
No, no.
Did we discuss that one yet?
Yeah. No, we haven't. They're simply overpowered. They have somebody who has mentally, emotionally twisted things around to make it appear in a way that it isn't, to make it appear that they are truly more powerful, and they're not. They're not more powerful, they're more crafty. It's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. They see all these things happening, but really behind the curtain, yeah, quite a different story.
Yeah. So if you're watching this recording right now and you've escaped from an abusive situation, please hear me say, I think you're the strongest person on the planet. I have absolute respect for you and the strength it takes to escape from that type of environment. And I mean that wholeheartedly. Yeah. You can't be raped if you're married.
Oh, yeah?
It's not considered rape if you're married. That's a better way to say that.
See, that's what I believed for so many years. And when I sat there and talked to that psychologist and told her some of the things that I had gone through, then she said, well, then he raped you. That's called rape. And I said, are you serious? And that just explained so much to me. That was another time that I'm sure I just broke down and just sobbed in her office to find out that, yes, you can be raped even though you're married. Because if you do not agree to that sexual encounter and it's not something that you want, lady, you're being raped, or mister, you're being raped. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and even in a marital situation, you can't play that game of, oh, it was implied consent. No.
No.
No. Because you said I do, and because you signed a marriage license that said that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with you, and because there have been times over the course of the relationship where I have consented to wanting to have a sexual relationship with you, does not mean every day of my life I'm consenting to have a sexual relationship with you.
Yeah, at the drop of a hat.
It's still your body, it's still your choice. And if the answer is no, I do not want to do that, you have to be respected. And it blows my mind in the legislative situation, the laws on that. And, you know, I've told you that before. I don't quite remember the dates now, but it was 1990, I think, I have to look up the dates, but it's roughly what I'm saying is correct. 1990, in the state of Missouri, it became illegal to rape your wife. 1990. Then in the General Assembly, when they met in 1994, they repealed that. And so I guess it was legal again. And it wasn't until 1997 that it was illegal to rape your wife and stayed on the books in the state of Missouri. 1997 is the year I started working at the crisis center. Wow. So let's put that in perspective.
Wow.
So even the lawmakers, the powers that be, had to be influenced to finally realize what we're talking about is definitely non-consensual. And it is against the law.
Wow, that took a long time to get that in effect in the state of Missouri.
Isn't that crazy?
What about,
I mean, really, it's embarrassing.
It is embarrassing. Do you know roughly like what that's like in other states around our country?
I don't.
Okay.
I honestly do not.
That's just crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Obviously, victims don't care about their children if they stay in an abusive relationship.
Wrong. That is false. Totally false. I wanted to get my kids out of there, and I wanted to take them and just raise them by myself. I knew my mom was a better mom when she was a single parent than she was when she was over somebody else who was abusing her and also abusing us. I knew I could do the same thing, but I knew if I did, it would have to be something like under the victim witness protection program, where I could change my name and my social security number, and the kids would have to change their names and yada, 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 so that he could never, ever find us again. And I didn't know if that was even possible. No,
Yeah.
that's how far how extreme I had thought this through.
Yeah.
And that's why I got into such depression, because I felt totally hopeless and helpless.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And so you've heard me say before, the same mom who stays in an abusive relationship to protect her child is the same mom who escapes the abusive relationship to protect her child.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a true statement. I mean, there's situations when we're talking about, let's go back to that financial abuse conversation that we just had a second ago. Let's say my abuser is a financial abuser as well.
Mm-hmm.
He has a job, I don't have a job. The house is in his name, the car is his. He gives me money or he doesn't. I have no income whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And the threat that's constantly hanging over my head is, if you leave me, I'll take the children away from you.
Mm-hmm.
So when I go to court with no job, no car, no work history, a zero balance with no bank account, am I the stable parent that the judge is going to look at and say, oh yeah, these children should be with you?
Mm-mm.
Probably not.
Mm-mm.
So the same mom who will leave when her children are at risk is the same mom who will stay, because if I stay in this abusive relationship, I'm around my children all day, every day, and I can protect them.
Mm-hmm.
If I leave to protect myself and he ends up with my children, I can't protect them anymore.
That's right. That's right.
I hate is a very strong word, but I hate that mentality,
Mm-hmm.
because what that's doing yet again is taking 100% of the responsibility off of the abuser and putting it on the victim.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you were a good mom, you'd leave. Why aren't we saying if you were a good dad, you wouldn't beat their mom? Why aren't we saying that? Why is that not the statement that people say?
Yes. Would you please say that again? Because I just love that. It's so powerful.
Yes. You cannot be a good dad and abuse a child's mother. You absolutely cannot. And that's the question we should ask. As a society, why do we allow that? But what we do is we turn around and we say, oh, you must be a bad mom because you're keeping them in an abusive environment. I'm not the abuser.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
I'm not keeping them in an abusive environment. The abuser is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We are so backwards on that concept.
Mm-hmm. And say it
And that
again.
just, man, I just get riled up. Boy, I get riled up when I hear people say that. If you loved your children, you wouldn't stay.
Yeah, exactly.
It's because I love my children that I stay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So turn that around and say, instead, we should ask, why do you go ahead and finish the question?
Why does the dad feel like it's okay to abuse the mom? The
Yeah.
number one thing when you talk about children who are victims, live in homes where abuse is taking place, the number one thing that we can do for that child is we can ensure their mother's safety.
Yeah.
And the second that child believes that their mother is safe, that child thrives.
Yeah.
The child that believes their mother is not safe, doesn't do their homework, falls asleep in class, gazes out the window and disappears, is disruptive, is unruly, is always going to the nurse's office.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, because I lived through that myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the mom's not doing that. It's not the mom.
No.
The mom's not doing that.
Mm-mm.
We've got to stop making that statement. We've got to.
Yeah. Yeah.
By staying, a survivor is encouraging or tolerating abusive behavior.
No. She's not encouraging it. And what was the other option? She was what?
Tolerating.
Tolerating it. That's stretching it.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say it's false.
Mm-hmm.
She's, again, we go back to, she's probably staying because of financial stability for the kids, if there are kids. And if not, she's probably terrified to leave and hasn't found an escape plan yet. That would be my answer. I don't know how accurate that is. I'll turn that over to you.
Let's talk about that word tolerate for a second, because clearly a victim is never going to encourage an abuser to abuse them. So that's just garbage, and let's throw that out. But let's talk about that word tolerate for a second. Have you ever had anybody in your life, not talking intimate partner relationship, just a person in your life that you've tolerated? You'd use the word, yeah, we really don't get along, but I tolerate them. Have you ever made that statement?
Yeah, but it's in a like a work situation or some
Okay.
other volunteer situation where I
Okay.
have no option but to have to be in the same room with that person or whatever.
Yeah. Has there ever been a family member that you could take or leave, but because they're married to so and so, I'm going to tolerate them?
Yeah, I've had blood relatives of my own. But
Mhm.
again, it's because there are going to be family get-togethers or something. And
Right.
so I don't have an option but to be around that person.
You do, but that's when you exercise your right to tolerate that person because you want
Hmm.
to be at the family gathering or whatever else, right?
Right.
And so you said, I don't have an option, but you do have an option. And the option that you're making is to tolerate that person because you want to be at the family gathering.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So then let's throw that word back into that statement. A survivor tolerates abusive behavior. We just determined through the process of the Pythagorean theorem. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. We just proved that when it comes to family or the work situation or whatever else, I have an option to tolerate that person or not.
Hmm.
And so when I do choose to, I make the choice to tolerate, correct?
Hmm.
Okay. In an abusive relationship, you don't have a choice.
No.
Your choices have been taken away from you.
Hmm.
The person is maintaining power and control over you. Your right to have a voice and your right to have a choice is gone. So tolerating doesn't even make sense. You don't even have the right to tolerate because your rights have been taken away.
Very good.
So 100% absolutely that's a myth.
Thank you for breaking that down. That's
Yeah.
good.
If a victim wanted the abuse to stop, they just leave. And we talked about that one already?
Yeah, we have. And
Okay.
that's totally false. It's a matter
Yeah.
of escaping, not leaving.
Right.
Leaving says that I can just go to the front door and waltz out,
Right.
and start
Right.
singing and dancing in the rain and that kind of stuff. No. Uh-uh.
Do
If
you
you're
sing and dance in
talking,
the rain, by the way?
what's that?
So do you sing and dance in the rain?
No, I do not.
Maybe you should.
Maybe I should. Maybe that's what I should do.
You have the choice to.
Yeah, but but in an abusive situation, no, you cannot just leave and walk out the door. Absolutely. They want to know where you are at all times. Where are you going? How long will you be gone? And and then if you're not, now that in the days of cell phones, well, then they'll call you nonstop or text you nonstop. Where are you? How come you haven't come home yet? Blah, 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 blah. And you're going to get that even
Right.
before the days of cell phones. Once you do
Right.
show back up, well, where were you? You were 2 hours longer than you said you were going to be, or you were 5 minutes longer than you were supposed to be. What were you doing? Were you out doing blah 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 and start accusing the person of whatever, such as having an affair or whatever?
Right.
Yeah, no, it's not true.
Right. How about this? The only perpetrators of abuse are men.
That is false. There are some abusers that are women, but the statistics show that the majority of them are men.
Yeah.
But not 100%.
Right. Yeah, and that's where I kind of get on my soapbox too when I talk about this is very much a gender-based issue. And I know that even the domestic violence movement has evolved over time. And there is a piece of that movement that does talk about the fact that there are male victims of abuse. And I'm not discounting that and saying that it does not happen because I know that it does.
Yeah.
But the prevalent victim of abuse is the female, and the prevalent perpetrator of the abuse is a male.
Mm-hmm. I know.
And people want to focus on that. And so that's why I find it frustrating when we have to talk about that. People anymore really want to focus on the fact it happens almost every time anymore that I do a public speaking engagement of any kind where somebody wants to say, well, aren't women abusive too? Sure. We all have the capacity to be abusive, But if you break it down again by we're motivated by power and control, and so we exercise these tactics to maintain power and control over our victims, it's calculated behavior done with a specific intent and purpose in mind. Women can be that way too, yes, but predominantly it's not.
And I know I've heard men speak. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just repeated my statement and said predominantly it's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard men speak at candlelight vigils during the month of October. And the stories, just for those of you that are watching, they were enough to make your hair stand up on end, you know, of what these men had been through. And then come and find out I had known a couple that were like this, and they were an upstanding couple in leadership positions in the church. That'll blow more people's minds. And she was abusing him. And believe me, he was very physically fit and was capable of defending himself in any situation. But what do you do when it's your wife?
Right.
You can't hit her.
Right.
Not without being abusive. So what does he do?
Yeah.
And had a family, they had children. What's he supposed to do? He was trapped in that.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I don't discount it. I have the utmost empathy. We shelter men at the crisis center, and when a man does come and stay at the crisis center, the dynamic that they're going through the healing and everything else is very, very similar to the same dynamic that a female victim goes through. And so I don't discount it. I don't take it away. I understand that it does happen, but it's the exception, not the rule. So, but men are not the only perpetrators, no. No. How about victims are only young women?
No, because that goes right along with what we just said. You know, that sometimes women do abuse, so the victims would be men or male.
Right. But older women get abused as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, you know, again, when we talk about domestic violence, is no respecter of persons. Age is one of those things. You can be 14, you can be 50, you can be 90, and find yourself in a situation where you're a victim of abuse. And all the ages in between. Yeah.
Yeah. And just
so young women are not the only victims that experience domestic violence.
We lived in an apartment complex, and there was a senior citizen couple that lived just down the hall and across the hall from us. And it still just brings back the memories. I never saw her, and she rarely got out of the apartment, but we would hear sounds like he was beating her up. And he was quite the character. Elder abuse does exist. So
very much so.
Yeah, anywhere between a newborn to the moment of death, they can be abused.
Absolutely. Couples counseling is the answer to stopping abuse.
False. And you are the one who revealed that to me, turned the spotlight on that.
Did you just feel the hair on the back of my head stand up when I read that?
Well, did on mine too. And tell us why.
Couples counseling does not work in an abusive situation. If I go into a counseling session with my abuser, who one is motivated to maintain power and control over me, who two has told me, if you tell anybody that I'm doing this, I'll kill you, who three has told me that it's my responsibility to protect his character and his name, and I sit in front of a counselor and the counselor says, tell me what's going on in your relationship, I'm going to say, everything's fine. Everything's fine. And then he's going to go on a tirade of he doesn't understand why we're here, but she drug him to come along, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It does not work. The entire couples counseling session will be an abuser justifying why he's not an abuser, and then further accusing her of being the reason he has to be the way that he is. And she's going to sit there and not say anything. That's how that looks. If you truly want to stay in a relationship with someone who's an abuser, a couple things have to happen. The abuser has to step up and say, I have a problem. I know what I'm doing is wrong, and I need help to make it stop. As a result, I'm going to seek counsel to help me change my behavior. You can't come. And so the abuser goes and focuses on the issues that they have as being an abuser, and they learn tools to change their behavior. While that's going on, the victim, if she's wise, is also going to counseling to learn the red flags, to understand the dynamic of the relationship, to learn how to overcome the negative messages that are replaying in her head, etc., and become the best version, the strongest version of herself that she can be. When she's at that place and the abuser has shown a willingness and then follow through on changing the behavior, then they could potentially go to couples counseling.
Thank you for clarifying.
To go to couples counseling right from the beginning, you're shooting yourself in the foot. It's never going to work. And honestly, unfortunately, the victim's going to be abused more because of it. It absolutely does not work.
Yeah, it doesn't. It didn't for us because it was, in general, it was the scenario you just played out.
Yeah. It just does not work.
And we tried multiple counselors.
Yeah. I think I've only got one left.
Oh my goodness.
I know. The abuse must not be that bad if the survivor is still with their partner.
Totally false.
Some of these are kind of redundant. That's a little bit redundant.
Well, that's okay though. I mean, but I will point this out, because over the length of time, I was married for over 20 years. It was actually over 22 and a half years. During that length of time, it got worse. It became more frequent. And in the last 15 months of my marriage, where I was actually living with him, it was downright scary, because I really thought, and I never shared this with anybody, but I didn't want to sound like an idiot, because nobody would have believed it. He was a deacon in our church, and they had asked him to be an elder. He was a volunteer police chaplain. He was, and I could just go on and on and on. He was a coach for basketball and a coach for, an assistant coach for baseball and all these kind of things. And nobody would have believed me, but I really was scared to death that he was going to kill me. I was terrified of that. And after I left, then all three kids told me separately, I'm glad you left, because I really believe Dad would have killed you.
Yeah.
So it was not my imagination. They saw it too.
No. Yeah. And how many times have you heard me say that abusive behavior increases in intensity and frequency over time? And so it does. It just gets worse and worse and worse and worse, to where that life-threatening feeling is the only feeling you have, because at any given moment that could happen. And you firmly 100% believe that your life is in danger all day, every day.
Exactly.
And so, there's that fear. And again, what the statistic I shared a little while ago, there's a greater risk of being killed when you leave. Even though the intensity and frequency is building in the home, there's a greater risk you're going to get killed if you stay. But if you leave, it's definitely going to happen. It's one of those kind of things, to where when you're in the home, you can try to figure out, what tactics of survival do I put into place today so I can live another day?
Exactly.
It is that.
And that I like to say that it's not just a cycle of domestic violence, but that it's more like, think of a spiral. And it might start out as a big circle, really big, but then it's going to get more and more frequent, like you said.
Right.
So it's like that circle getting smaller and smaller. Yeah. And with that, the intensity.
That's a great analogy. It's very much like a spiral. I agree with you.
Yeah, that's how I've seen it for years.
Yeah.
In my head.
Yeah. So the questions that I'm sharing with you came from an article that was published in 2017.
Okay.
So it's been a couple of years ago, but that's not that long ago to think that as a society, people in general believe these things are true. Everything that we said, everything that I asked you obviously was a myth, but we still live in a society that believes the majority of these things are true.
Yeah. Crazy.
The general person on the street, even still today, does not understand domestic violence. If they've never been a victim of it, if they've never known someone who was a victim of it, they don't understand it. And it goes to my cliche statement that I say all the time: the reasonable mind tries to make reason out of unreasonable behavior. If I'm not in an abusive relationship and you tell me that happened, I don't get it. I'm going to walk away. You don't make sense to me. Like, live your life, but it doesn't make sense. And so the general person on the street believes these things are true. Still,
that's
years later.
That in itself is scary, because each person who believes that will say that and talk about it in the home. And yet, how many of their friends, relatives, children, younger brothers, sisters, that kind of thing, are going to believe that? So when they get in an abusive marriage, they're going to think back to what their sibling or whoever it was said and think, oh, well, no, okay. So then, yeah, because the reason I say that is because I heard an older sister say in a conversation to my mom that she had it taught to her through a church teaching that even if he hits you physically, you need to stay. And so that was my whole, that's where I got that from.
Right.
I mean, I didn't make that up, but that was incorrect. It was a lie. It was false. It's not true.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important that we have conversations like this.
Yes.
Because when we flat out say these things are all untrue, flat out myths, flat out lies, completely false, I'm hoping that we're sharing a bit of prevention.
Yes.
That if somebody heard their older sister say that and we come along and say absolutely not, and here's why, we can undo that. So that's the point of having this conversation, is that maybe somebody watching will say, I always thought that was true. And now that I see that it's not, I wonder what else I thought was true that maybe it's not. And we educate people. Exactly. The way to change the mentality of the society around us is to educate them. So, I mean, that's our goal. We've talked about that before, is we want to provide that education. We want to provide that support. So it's good to talk about these things.
It really is. And that brings me to a point I hadn't even thought about. So if nobody's watched our podcast before and they're hearing you say all this stuff and they're thinking, who is she? Who is she that she thinks she knows anything? Okay.
I'm Becky from Branson.
Yeah. So what does Becky from Branson know? Big deal. Okay, so I'll read you her bio, folks. I'll read Becky's bio for you. So Becky Vermeer is the executive director of the Crisis Center of Taney County, and she has begun her 26th year in that position. I could stop right there and not read any more, but you need to hear the rest of it, You want me to stop? She is responsible for grant writing, fundraising, programming, staff oversight, and community awareness activities. Becky graduated from the College of the Ozarks with a double major in psychology, philosophy, and religion. Becky has served statewide on the board of directors for the Missouri Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence and held the offices of president and vice president for 4 years consecutively. Becky has been asked by multiple statewide associations to present trainings on domestic and sexual violence. First of all, she has to know the information before she can present the trainings.
That is helpful. That's the preferred way to do that.
Yeah. Usually that's the way you bring a speaker in, is because they know a topic, but you know. Finally, Becky has been qualified by the local court system as a domestic violence expert witness and is called upon to provide testimony for the prosecution in domestic violence cases. And that did not come about just because Becky walked up to a judge and said, "Hi, I'm Becky from Branson." There's a reason.
Not exactly.
What's that?
Not exactly.
Not exactly. So you had to probably jump some hoops and get some real verification under your belt before they would even consider having you.
That's correct, yeah.
So you didn't bring up the fact that I'm wearing a turtleneck. So then what do I look like?
I don't know. What do you look like?
Roll on deodorant.
Yeah. This weird instinct to ask you if you wanted to raise your hand if you're sure. But I didn't think I probably better do that.
You are too funny.
Oh boy.
Exactly. Or is it your secret, Becky?
I mean, now, what degree are we going to take this to? This conversation should be banned.
Oh.
You started it.
I did. I really did. Okay. So we have an expert right here, folks. So
What they say.
You're silly.
We need to start reading your bio too.
Okay.
I don't have it, but we need to start reading it.
You can
You have
if
it?
you want to. You'll have to have it ready. I have yours ready. I got you.
I would say you're an expert too.
I'm an expert in my story. I'm not an expert in domestic violence in general, obviously, because I answered a few things wrong tonight. So
You did?
Yes. So that's why we have you on here, see, so that you can straighten us all out and inform us what domestic violence really is. This has been really great. You had a great idea tonight, Becky. This is really
Thank you. I was excited to have this conversation. I think it's necessary. I'm just really surprised that it took me so long to think that we needed to have this conversation, honestly.
Yeah, it never dawned on me. And it was, as soon as you said it tonight, I'm like, well, duh.
I know. That's kind of how I felt. And I was like, wait, we haven't talked about that? What are we thinking?
Right? Exactly. This is the point where I would really encourage somebody who has a question, please put it in the comment section of the YouTube channel, or you can email us. That information is on our YouTube channel, or you could also contact us on our Facebook pages and send us a private message. However you'd want to do that, and I'm sure that Becky would not mind answering that question. Because you've seen, if you've been watching our YouTube channel, we've had different episodes where Becky has no idea what I'm going to ask her, and she loves it because then she can turn around and answer it. So please don't be afraid to shoot us those questions. We will not mention your name on air if she answers that question. Absolutely not. We will keep it confidential. If you prefer that it not be asked on air, let us know that. No one sees these comments on our YouTube channel until we have approved them. So that's one thing I haven't mentioned before, is that we would never mention your name. So let's say you say it's okay, just don't say my name. Not a problem. We wouldn't do that anyway. So make sure.
It would be fun. Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
You know what would be fun? It'd be fun for me anyway. If we have enough people that really do start sending in some questions or sending in comments, we could have an episode called Stump the Expert.
There you go. Oh, I like that.
test my brain and see if my brain can figure it out. I think that would be fun.
Folks, you've been given a challenge. Stump the expert.
The gauntlet has been thrown out.
Yes. Let's have people respond now, okay? Let's see if we can stump Becky. That would be good. Your twin sister is going like this, right?
Yeah, she's like, I got a question for you.
Please stump my sister. Folks, make sure that you subscribe to our channel so you know when these videos come out, and it helps if you go ahead and hit the like button so that YouTube can get the word out a little bit faster, and feel free to spread the word. You know, you can hit that share icon and share that with somebody. And thank you, Becky, for your expertise again. We love it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, we're a team now, so
that's true.
Folks, remember that no matter where you are in the process, you're always free to soar.